really for today's presentation, I would like to cover some of the bases of Whistling Gardens, just our 10 years. This marks our 10th anniversary this season. So I was gonna give you a little bit of a past and present and future sort of a feel with this today. And I have a bunch of interesting plants in there I think we should chit chat about as well, because we always like to learn more about plants and some of our successes and some of our failures when it comes to gardens. And as you can see on the screen here, this is about the first tree actually planted in the gardens. It's a big Vanderwolf pyramid pine. It was touted as a dwarf for many, many years. Well, it's almost 30 feet tall and it's definitely not a dwarf. And my shovel there leaning against the tree worked flawlessly for 25 years of service. And I've sharpened it so many times it decided that on one of my trees a couple of years ago, it was just broke. So now I got to go back to England and get another one of these fancy shovels because I can't find them anywhere in North America. But anyway, maybe it's a hint. I don't know, but I still have a few things left to do. I would like to just kind of take you right back to the very beginning. We bought this farm off of the internet, literally, and what you're looking at is a pretty open field. Everything that's out there was planted by me, but right in front of you is the garden center today. And this is what it looked like in 2006. I used to work in Linden, Ontario, and I did all kinds of stuff there. But when I moved out to the Wilsonville, I decided let's try something completely different. I had a fascination for particularly conifers just because of my travels through Europe. And there was always interesting colors and textures all season long. And I was really intrigued by it. And I wondered why they didn't exist so much in Canadian gardens. And so 2006, like here, we just threw a piece of plastic on the ground. We grabbed a bunch of plants and threw them out there and waited for people to show up. And lots of people did. I thought it was a successful year. And this started my love affair with stones. There aren't too many left in Norfolk County. I think I've gathered them all up and glued them together to make something or other over the years. But if you just look behind me, you'll see that those fields are still soybeans and corn, or they've been harvested already. And we really started with nothing out there. And this was a picture taken in January. And I was pretty happy with my first experiment with stone walls. And this is an arbor in the garden center. So I really do like to specialize in plants you just don't see every day, either in gardens or garden centers. And I spend a lot of time looking for new stuff. I work with different plant breeders from across North America. We even bring in plants from other botanical gardens, just to give people the opportunity to bring home something for the gardens that's quite unique. Yes, of course, we've got the Japanese maples and the dogwoods of all types, but I really like to find different unusual plants. And this is just a golden Japanese pine. And in behind it is just a very dwarf form of a Colorado spruce. A couple years ago, probably 3 years ago, we were finally rezoned to have a gift shop on site. So this was our old perennial house here, and now it serves as a gift shop. And we like to carry a lot of local artisans material. So it could be paintings, it could be carvings, it could be even cards, illustrators that make gift cards and other types of giftware out of whatever their creativity involves. And my little mascot is up there on the counter all the time. He's with me every day and night. He's sleeping at my feet right now. That's Lego. He's very happy to greet everyone. So what we've done is just move the perennials to a different section in the garden center, and now we can keep things inside. So it's worked out pretty good for us. This is still the employee of the year. It probably will be for years to come. It's done so much work out there. It's incredible. Yeah, it's pretty hard not to have some sort of machinery doing what we've done. I checked on this plant last night and the flowers are almost out. And when the flowers are almost out on this viburnum, then I know for sure spring is just around the corner. It is a very dwarf viburnum, and nanum does mean dwarf if you translate that into English from its botanical name. So it's a Farrar or Ferrers viburnum, and I really like it. Mine's about 3.5 feet tall. It's 10 years old now. I've never pruned it. I've never done anything to it, and I really enjoy those pink flowers because most are white on viburnums that bloom typically at the end of May, the beginning of June. So just to let you know where we are now, we've got nearly 5,000 different plants in the collections. It goes up and down depending on my mood or depending on the winter that we go through. We always lose something. There's creatures that might eat a few things as well, as some of us probably experienced over the years. There are a lot of perennials. We've been focusing on it. Now this slide's about, it's a little older, but we do have almost 1,500 different peonies in the collection that were donated, and it's just massive, and I'll show you some pictures of them. And we don't have quite as many conifers anymore. We sold some off. We dug a few out because we got so many peonies, we didn't know where to put them anymore. So we liberated a few plants. There was always a few things I wasn't sure that would do well in this climate. I tried them. Sometimes they weren't really successful. And we've been getting a few different things with fungal infections in plants, and conifers are no exception. And I really don't want to go through a fungal program to control this problem. So for us, it's just easier to remove it from the collection. We make notes of it. And I don't know, there's so many wonderful choices in plants nowadays. We can always find something new to replace it. So this is one of the first gardens. We took kind of a swampy area full of Phragmites, filled it back in a little bit, put the first garden in. This was what it looked like a season later in 2008, but this is in 2019, same angle. The cottonwood trees have all grown up in the back. They're about 40 something feet tall now. And this was a hedge I was pruning yesterday, actually. It's our golden lindens, brilliant yellow in the spring as the new leaves emerge. I keep it at about 1.5 feet tall, like going up to about 14 feet anymore. So I've chopped it down a bit just to keep it more in check. I don't think I bounce if I fall off my ladder quite like I used to a few years ago. So it's a little bit more manageable, but it's a nice contrast with the dark weeping green hedges there that are just in the front of it. And so it looks kind of nice all season long in some form or another as we wait for perennials and bulbs to get going for the season. Now, as I mentioned, I used to live out in Troy, just off Highway 5. Well, I worked in Linden, but I lived in Troy. And when we did purchase this farm, we needed somewhere for my little collection of goodies that I'd been acquiring over the years to go somewhere, because my boss told me, he says, great, you've got your own farm, you can get rid of your crap off my land. And so I was graciously offered this little wedge of land here. They took the soybeans off, and in I went and I started planting everything. And this is the exact same angle of that picture you just saw previously, 11 years onwards, and we're digging trees out of this garden even today. This, not actually today, but even now, moving them to a forever home, because sometimes when you read the label at a plant in your favorite garden center that you go to and it says it gets 3 feet tall or 4 feet tall, quite often it still gets up to 10 or 12 feet, and you know what happens then. So, and when we first started collecting all these evergreens, we were getting them in from all over the world. Often they didn't even have an English name associated with it. I had no idea what was going to happen to this plant, and some of them did stay dwarf, some of them just shot up and went to 20 feet. And so we did have to move a few things around, and in behind that planting of spruces and hackberries and tulip trees, we have a lot of our peonies hiding in there now. Just to give you an idea how fast things can grow. This is in 2009. These are the Dawn redwood trees that come from China. They were found in 1945. And this is what they look like in 2018. And I took this picture just this past fall. And our tallest Dawn redwood is nearing 70 feet tall. It is unbelievable how quickly these things have sprouted out of the ground in 11 years. I'm very happy with them. The largest ones in Ontario are in Niagara Falls. They're on River Road. So if you were going to go down there for an evening, just along the main road beside the river, the largest ones are around 110 feet tall today. So mine are catching up. I'm pretty happy about it. Here's how thick they are after 11 years, just to give you an idea. So a lot of these gardens started, as I say, with nothing. I took a picture here 10 years ago, and this is what it looks like 10 years later. We've got all of our trees that are native left and right. I really do like Carolinian species of trees. Most of the borders of the gardens do have native plantings, and there's no exception here. We even have Osage oranges. There's service berries in there. There's red oaks, black oaks, Shumard oaks, pin oak. I think we have most of them. And this collection, like I say, has evolved quite a bit. We do have some very, very rare plants out here. One of the rarest trees on the planet is in the gardens. We have 2 specimens. We have people, curators coming up before COVID to come and see them because they're just so rare in collections. And one of our plants, our Bashan fir, actually seeded this season. And we don't know exactly how the DNA of the seeds will be because we have other species of fir trees in the collection. And it has to go to actually Chicago for DNA testing just to see how viable and how closely or how pure the seed actually might be. So because a lot of pollinators just go from tree to tree and they're not terribly worried about having pure seeds, they're just looking for food. Here's just another example of taking a very recent planting in 2008. This is fresh pretty much. You can see the corn is still in the background in the West Garden that doesn't even exist yet. But here these trees grow up in 11 years. This is the same pine tree. This big pine in the back here is a native eastern white pine that's been crossed with the Mexican white pine, which was surprisingly hardy for us. And it started to cone a couple of years ago. So if anybody needs seeds from that hybrid, you'd be welcome to them. I could help you out. I'll climb up there and get them. And just a few things that have been the seasons. Here's a stone bridge. I went to the Royal Botanical Gardens when they still had a library. Unfortunately, not much information on how to build a stone bridge. So this is my by gosh or by golly moment. You always need more stones than you think. And that's with any project. But there's the stone bridge there last spring, just on a drizzly spring day. The red buds are all blooming in the background, and the tree that's blooming on the left is a Susan magnolia. And all of our native trees are in the back here. There's tulip trees and different red maples. Oh, it goes on and on. I have another picture here. Same kind of angle, but this is in the fall now. Arguably the prettiest time of the season is the end of October with all these colors. If you need to see a certain color, we have it at the end of October. It's quite incredible. All these just different shades of purples and reds and plums that go on, oranges, of course. And I really like it. The little red bud is going to be our little alcohol booth later on the summer, and I'll get into that very shortly. We had an area here that never been farmed. It was just too wet, and filled it in a bit, started our rock garden. It seemed like a good idea. And that's it here. It's being constructed, getting some more of these local stones from ginseng farmers and vegetable farmers and that are neighbors. And that's kind of what it looked like in 2020 here in November. So still a bit of fall color going on in November. Unfortunately, another case of, wow, I didn't think it was going to get that big. So trees have been getting liberated for a little while because some of my perennials are getting crowded out. This is taken last November. So November, you can still get beautiful fall color. I really like it. The one here on the left with the orange is the bald cypress trees. If you were in Florida in the past, you wouldn't see this tree for sure down there. It's everywhere. If you've been along the Alligator Highway in southern Florida there, you would definitely have seen them. And there's that golden dawn redwood with that nice russet orange color too. This is what our rock used to look like. And I've been renovating and renovating, as most gardeners have to do with gardens. I just want things to stay small and cute. And sometimes we get some things that just don't behave that way. And so we're always tweaking plants and plantings, of course. Lots of pretty things. The one on the bottom, I get a lot of comments in the spring, and this is a barberry called Orange Rocket. Beautiful orange color in the spring, and then it goes through a phase of red and cherry colors before it starts to mellow out into a burgundy color. It's quite nice. I like it. It's not the most common variety you'll ever see, but definitely very showy for several weeks in the spring. On the very left of this slide is our fringe tree. It's considered a Carolinian tree. It's tough as nails. I don't know of any of them that actually live in Ontario native. You have to go to the other side of Lake Erie to find them, but I think it's a beautiful plant. It's also called old man's beard. And the fruit is very, very, well, attractive to most birds, especially in September when they're migrating. Cedar waxwings, robins, oh, grackles, starlings, all the rest of them line up there to get a few of those berries that are on that plant. I really like it. The flower is just different. It blooms in June, which is a bit later than some of the other spring flowering trees. And in the back there is a golden variegated catalpa tree. Most of us probably know what a catalpa looks like, but this is a very rare golden form of it. And I find it interesting. It's going to be quite unique in the next few years as these branches develop more and more. If you look dead center in this slide, you will see this white Colorado spruce. It's Colorado spruce. It's an albino. It was found in Wisconsin on a Christmas tree farm. And every spring it comes out with snow white needles. And then later on, they will change into some form of turquoisey blue and gray. The color phases continually change. I really like it. So unusual, so different and unique for a tree. And I'm glad it just didn't get thrown through the chipper. And then, of course, there's lots of hostas and perennials and other things in here. We have a lot of irises from the Macmillan family out in Norwich that went into this garden as well. This is a water feature, and a lot of people say, oh, your little pond, I guess, if you want to call it that, is all full of algae. And it's not. It's full of duckweed, thousands upon thousands of them. And they're all individual little plants. They're all floating on top of the water. They all have their little root system that's underneath each plant. And I really like this plant. I find it attractive. And I also find it's just perfect for hiding our bullfrogs and leopard frogs. If you live out in a rural area, sometimes your favorite little creatures in your pond disappear. We have the same issues with minks and raccoons and blue herons and green herons that come in and fish my beloved bullfrogs out of there. If I leave that duckweed in there, they can hide and they're not as easy to find. So it's a little bit of an education process, but I'm always happy to do it. And actually the duckweed does keep the algae down to a bare minimum because there's no light getting to the bottom where algae may grow. So I do like it and I find it kind of attractive. This is our birdhouses in the background there. And most weekends in the summer, we'll let out our homing pigeons go. We have the white ones and they're used for wedding when people request to have a dove release. And really a dove release is just a white homing pigeon. And I'm kind of sneaky because I'll go in and I'll take the females out of the pen that might be sitting on a nest, put them in that lovely little ornamental cage there. And once the wedding ceremony is over, they release those pigeons. And about 6 minutes later, they're back in their house and they're sitting on their nest again because, well, instinct takes over. You've already seen a few pictures of this when it had corn and soybeans. Well, they left for the last time in 2009. And so there I was mapping things out. I thought, well, let's get it going. 13 months later, this is what it looked like. It was a very wet area. I thought, let's just make this kind of a pond, if you will. And this tree that's on this island is actually a living fountain. So there's hoses that go all through the tree there. And when we turn on the pumps in the spring, water comes sprouting out of the tree back into the pool. That tree now is about 3 times the size and it's getting harder and harder to climb to put more hoses in it. Maybe someday I'll have to get somebody else to do it. I don't know. It's getting pretty tall. And this is what I just mentioned about people getting married. There's always weddings going on weekends out here. And you can just see from, well, almost a branch from this picture. And this is the spot where everybody has this big ceremony. But I found this on an old hard drive. And my laptop one year got hit by lightning. Of course, it died. And we sent the hard drive to Guelph to get all the pictures and information taken off of that hard drive. And there was a few really old ones I'd completely forgotten about. So here they are. And this is the exact same picture taken 11 years later. It's unbelievable how it's all filled in. On the left-hand side, the canopy is our native red maples. And I think there's a serviceberry you can see. And on the right-hand side is our red oaks. And those oaks now are 40 feet tall in 11 years. So oak trees aren't that slow. And of course, now that's a little bit nicer to get married up on that platform than standing in front of a bunch of rocks sitting on the ground. But this is the same angle, just a reverse of the previous photo. And this is what it looked like this past fall. So I really do like this progression, how things have grown up so quickly. And it's almost like we put these U's in here. We call it the U rooms, and we keep all our native trees in there. And actually Fanshawe College, Niagara Parks, they come and collect seeds off some of our rare species of trees in here. We have yellow buckeye, we have cherry birch trees. We send all that seed and we just donate it for anybody who needs it and wants to get it going. This is just a picture taken in the summer now, same kind of idea. When you come to the gardens in the summertime, the big thing that you see, and if you have your own gardens, you'll know that daylilies and lilies tend to be a big blooming genus of plants. And I just want to bring your attention to this thistle. It doesn't bite you. The flowers don't hurt you. The leaves don't hurt you. The stems, they don't bite in any way. But I like blue because it's so hard to get blue in the summertime unless you have annuals or bluey purples. And a lot of daylilies start anywhere from yellow to red and any color in between with those Pantones. And it's just nice to have the contrast. So this is called Veitch's blue thistle. It's not a rare plant. You can get it at most garden centers. And way off in the back is sea holly. I just have the species of it because it grows 4 or 5 feet tall and it gets higher than the peonies that might be in front of it. And it's definitely taller than daylilies. And so you get these nice color combinations in July and August. So just keep it in mind. It's called Veitch's blue. It's named after the very famous plant explorer Veitch that went to Asia, brought all kinds of fun stuff back from Asia to Kew Gardens in England, and eventually those plants made it all over the world. Now, this does not exist anymore out there in the gardens. I thought it was kind of fun. I've traveled through most gardens in Europe, not most, there's thousands of them, but I've traveled through many gardens through Europe. And nobody ever seemed to catch on to this idea. At least they didn't seem to like it, or they didn't comment on it. And I took these weeping Colorado spruces and I put these stakes in the ground and I tied their branches to these stakes that make it look like walking canes. And it looks like some sort of prehistoric family on the move, maybe Ents or something like this. And I think I only ever had 2 or 3 people ever comment on it and say, oh, Darren, that's kind of brilliant. I like that, it's fun. And one of them was a designer from England, actually, that came over and did an apprenticeship through the Royal Horticultural Society. And I thought, okay, well, that's good enough for me. And then all of a sudden, I started to get these peony donations, and I just didn't know what to do with all these peonies anymore. They were coming in fast and furious. There was a new purulator truck coming in the yard just about daily. And well, anyway, I replaced them on the hill with this arbor. This is under construction. Started to make some new beds. This is what it looks like if you were to go there at any time in June. It's an amazing show. Just unbelievable variety of peonies, different heights, different colors. These are the traditional types. We don't stake any of them. They're all on their own. And there's a sign there on the left-hand side of this slide of peonies, and it's quite informative because in that section we have roughly 25 peonies that were all introduced into commerce in the 1800s. So prior to 1900, that's where all these peonies are, and you almost every single one of them in your favorite garden center today. Some of the varieties are over 200 years old and they're still going strong, and those varieties are the ones that traditionally like to fall over. And the reason why they do is they were bred for flower production. They weren't necessarily bred to be in our gardens to be enjoyed. So their heads are big and poofy. They have that lovely old world fragrance to them. And on a rainy or very windy day, they tend to flop over a bit. So just so you know, for every one of those that flops over, there's probably 10 to 15 varieties of peonies that will never flop over. They're just bred to be in for ornamental use and just look good in our gardens. It's a sea of them. Once they go, it's about a 7-8 week show. Our first peony always blooms on May 4th or May 5th. You can pretty much set your watch to it. She's a very, very rare peony that comes from way up in the mountains in China. And it's a woodland peony, so it can't grow in full sun like these peonies like to be. It's called Marie's peony. And I really like it. It's a cute thing. It can bloom even at -7. It doesn't care. It's unbelievably tough. And all peonies I find are quite tough as well. About the biggest problem you'll see with them in your own gardens is powdery mildew, that white substance that gets on the leaves. Aesthetically horrible looking, but does not do any damage to the actual plant itself. And this is just one of my favorite peonies. I have to yet capture its true color when it starts to emerge in the spring, because it's an orange apricot color. Every 24 hours, the flower changes color. I love that. I just love how the color will go from this orange apricot to day 12, where it finishes off in ivory. And the name of it is Lorelei. It's really quite pretty. It's slow to clump up. It was developed in the United States, and it is slowly but surely becoming available throughout garden centers. And in the very front, our yellow peony here, this is Prairie Charm. This is a cross between a perennial and a tree, or a shrub, if you want to call it that. And it was done in Japan. It took the breeder, Dr. Ito, about 30-something years to finally get a cross between a perennial and a bush or a tree form of a peony. Unfortunately, he didn't live to see his very first ones bloom, and the very first peonies were bloomed. And 3 decades later, those first 4 plants that he did get to crossbreed went to the United States. And as they say, the rest is history, because you can get them in all colors now. I really like them. They bloom for a very long time. Just to give you an idea of color, it just keeps going and going. This is early June. June 10th, June 12th is one of the best times to see as many of them going as possible. You'll never see them all in one visit, because every few days another one opens up. I just wanted to bring your attention to a few other perennials that I find kind of fun. This is the old-fashioned Maltese cross. If it blooms in June, it will rebloom in September if you take the flower head off. But in the very foreground is a new plant. Some of you may have it already. It's been out for about 3 years. It's called Midnight Marvel, and it's a perennial hibiscus. I like them. Beautiful big red dinner plate flowers, crimson colored. I like this dark burgundy foliage. It stays on it for a good chunk of the season. And if you're like me, you probably deal with a few Japanese beetles on some of your plants in your own gardens. They're not terribly fussy on what plant they land on and what they like to chew, but they definitely love perennial hibiscus. And the reason why I'm showing you this plant is because if we do get some Japanese beetles on this plant, which is inevitable, they'll probably find it. It's you do not see the bite marks, that chewing from that insect on there, as you would on a green leafed version of this plant. And so from a distance, it still looks very good. And even close up, you don't see the damage that those Japanese beetles cause on the leaves. And I just, for me, I like that much better. The green leafed versions always show their chew marks on there. That's that perennial hibiscus in the far background with the red flowers. There's a lot of different shrubs in here. Little quickfire, a dwarf hydrangea. The smoke bush on the right-hand side is a new dwarf variety that's come out, and its name is Young Lady. I just pruned it a few days ago, and it still had its smoke on the top of the plant. I find that very attractive when it can keep that kind of look to it for a good chunk of the year. It just, to me, it gives an added interest into the added texture. This is a hydrangea that we imported in from Japan. Unfortunately, the flowers you won't write about like you would for Little Quickfire or Pinky Winky or Vanilla Strawberry and all the rest of those lovely hydrangeas bred for their flowers. This one is just because of its foliage, and it does very well in shade. It does very well in full sun. The leaves don't burn. It's great for lighting up a little bit of a darker corner in your own garden. And oak leaf hydrangea is another native hydrangea. Not many people realize that, but I like it. This is a seedling that I received, and I got it from, I think I got this from the Toronto Botanical Gardens. And this seedling comes up and it's pink every fall, and I really like that. Most of them go burgundy, And if you look in the foreground, you'll see the peonies on the bottom here that have purple foliage. Not all of them go brown. Actually, quite a few peonies have lovely oranges and nice purples and plums in them for fall color. So there's definitely possibilities to have fall color out of some of your perennials too. I really like the oak leaf hydrangea also because the bark peels away in the winter time and it shows off that cinnamon bark that it has. It's really quite attractive as it gets older. These are echinaceas. They're only partially native. Actually, this species is not native in Ontario. But we do have the native one, but this one, I don't do anything with them. Prior to coming on and speaking with you this morning, just before we did go on, we were just chatting about perennials and certain things that we get cleaned up in the spring. And I always leave these to about the last. And the reason why I do is because it's still a seed source for birds. We have a lot of birds migrating back now from the south. And I find blanket flowers and echinaceas and some of the other perennials are a source of food for them. And probably in about 2-3 weeks from now, I will finish cutting these back. I just let them reseed themselves. The birds, of course, don't get every single seed. And we get new colors and new textures and different quill patterns. And I just let them do their thing. But I find it, for me, important just to have a nice little food source. We have all kinds of song sparrows coming back. I seen some bluebirds the other day. So nice come up and it gives them something to chew on for a moment. This just gives you an idea what you might see in August. Crocosmias are going, that bright red in the background. Some of the daylilies that bloom later in the season go. Echinaceas are phloxes. There's a smoke bush with a golden leaf on it. Always something happening. Of course, the big show is always in June. Cacti bloom in June as well. These are native to Canada. We have 3 of the 4 species that are native here. And this one comes from Saskatchewan, and I like them. We got them in different colors. The only thing that I don't particularly like about them is weeding around them. They do bite, and it's not the thorns that are on them necessarily. It's the fine little red filaments that get stuck in you. Tuck tape, Scotch tape, all those things will help get rid of a few of them if they're stuck in your hands and you can't find it. But I really like them a lot. I think they're fun. And they're just interesting plants, but they need well-drained soil to be very happy. This is just a picture here when we take a cornfield and then we decide to, stake it out, plant 1,500 boxwoods and then do this. It wasn't supposed to have an arbor. This arbor is always under construction of some sort. And this year we're going to have to remodel it a bit again. But it's the most formal feature we have in the gardens. Most of the gardens are fairly natural. And this is our pond that we dug, and that soil made that rock garden that we looked at a little bit earlier. No, the tractor didn't dig that out. It was done with a bulldozer. I just went in there and cleaned out the edges. It took about 5 weeks to fill up because we have a spring in the back and a spring in the front that fills it up, and our swans are there. And this is just a nice October morning, nice and early. Everybody, they come out and say hello every day. And this was mentioned not too long ago too about Stratford with the fanfare of releasing their swans every spring. They haven't done that for a while. My mom used to take my nieces and nephews there. When it's time to get our swans off the pond, my sister would come out and I just go grab one. I sit in the back of my car. It sits on my lap. I hold on to him, and my sister takes me up to the greenhouse, and we put him in the greenhouse for the winter. And he doesn't care if you know anything about swans or birds in general. If he was pretty upset with me, his neck would be about 3 times the size. But yeah, he just sits there and enjoys the ride. And I will be taking probably our birds out of the greenhouse in the next 7 days. I think after Sunday, because it's supposed to be -10 or something. So out they go. No fanfare either for that. They just go out and they're very happy. Now, some of you are going to be like me. There's a few plants that we just can't garden there's a few areas in our gardens that we can't garden with and not have a lot of success growing stuff. This pink flowering plant here is called Queen of the Prairie. It will grow in clay, it will grow almost in water, it'll grow in a swamp, it'll grow in sand, it'll grow in shade. It is a Western North America native plant. I really like it. What I also like about this plant is now there's dwarf forms of it, because this becomes quite tall. It gets 6-7 feet tall. If you like that, that's great. It's also called Filipendula. Another nifty thing on here, I don't clean these up either because the stems are hollow. Bees and wasps will overwinter in those hollow stems. And so it'll be about 2-3 weeks before I go in there and I'll cut them down and clean them all up. The bees will be all long gone. And I just find it's a great plant for areas that are extremely difficult. I also like it because it blooms in July and the beginning of August, when sometimes it's hard to get something blooming at that time of year, especially 5 feet off the ground. And this is just another picture of the crocosmias. I can't grow the orange ones. There's a yellow flowered version of it. I just can't seem to grow this little bulb that comes from South Africa. They always die out on me, so I keep continuing to grow the red forms of it. And I have very good success with them. They look very tropical and exotic. And I guess they are in a way because they do come from South Africa. I bet you some of you will know Jack Kent. And Jack Kent donated about 95 daylilies to me. These were all his hybridized seedlings. And I received this donation before he retired and moved down to Nova Scotia. We have them everywhere. And there's some really beautiful plants that he had developed, but he never went through the process of registering them. So we just planted them out there. They're still nameless for all intents and purposes. There's a couple in there, I think, that are very worthy of naming. We might get around to that in the future. Again, the reds of the crocosmia in the background really kind of help set off the yellows and things like this with these daylilies too. This didn't turn out the way I hoped. I took another picture of it yesterday. And there's 4 trees I wanted to point out. This little hummock here, this golden fall colored ginkgo. Now it's got green leaves in summer, yellow in the fall. Here's a dwarf Colorado spruce and a dwarf Japanese white pine. All of them are over 20 years old. And the Canadian hemlock on the left-hand side is about 10-11 inches tall. So it grows about 3 or 4 millimeters a year on a good year. And that ginkgo is about 22, 23 years old, and the spruce and the pine are about the same. It just gives you an idea that dwarf plants are sometimes relative. Some of them do different things when they're dwarf. In terms of this pine, it's very rare to get a pine that spreads out sideways rather than growing up. And that Colorado is a beautiful little dense plant. I've never pruned it, never done anything to these plants. They just grow naturally. Personally, I love that. I just don't have time to chase after every single plant in the garden. So if you can look after yourself, I'm pretty happy about that. This is a plant that belongs in your gardens. If antelope and bison can run all over this thing out in the prairies, you can certainly grow this thing as well in your gardens. It's called Amsonia. Some people call it table on the mountain. I find that hard to remember. Amsonia is easier. This is the fall color of it. Here's another picture of it. Beautiful, beautiful fall color for a perennial. And this is its picture. In the background is another dwarf ginkgo. This is its picture in June. Really beautiful indigo flowers. Amsonia, not a rare plant. It's slow to make a little colony like this. I believe I started out with 32 different plants. Now they've grown in and they touch each other. It's a nice carpet. It's still relatively easy to divide it. So if you wanted to move it to another area, this has taken me 11 years to get that colony that size. So it's pretty slow when it comes to spreading. This is something else. I love fall colors on plants because in the summer, we tend to gravitate towards things that bloom and have a flower. But in the fall, I still want to see color in the garden. And this is a red vein Anchianthus. It's also mislabeled as a lily of the valley shrub, which it is not. There's actually a lily of the valley shrub that exists. But the flowers look exactly like lily of the valleys. They come in white, pink, and red. This is a nice, very growing version of it. Beautiful fall color. In June it blooms with those little bell flowers on them, and like sandy soil, tough as nails. It's 6 feet tall. I've never pruned it. When I bought it, it was 5 years old, and yeah, 9 years later it's still not even 6 feet tall. I like it. It's quite pretty. And in the background, you can see some of our native viburnums there with the burgundies. And there's, I have to have at least one burning bush in the garden. So there it is on the left-hand side. Here is a nice place to hang out. It gets a lot of shade. It's just a nice place to be. Here's another angle of it with the Japanese maples coming out in the spring. The red buds are blooming. This is more of a June thing. We do not paint our alliums over here, those Globemaster alliums. When they're done, they're done. We don't go spray paint them all different exotic colors to make them look kind of fun. I see a lot of people do it, but we don't. And there's banana trees. And this is kind of ever evolving. Put a lot of annuals and tropicals in this garden now too. Just to show you, a willow can grow about 55 feet in around 14 years. And this is one of our hydrangeas. And that is the parent that makes all those fancy ones that you see from Proven Winners and First Editions now. So there's Pinky Winky and Limelight and Quickfire, Little Quickfire, all of those types. Usually the parent, one of the parents is this one. This one, I believe, was introduced in the 1800s. It's not as showy as all those new ones, but I have to kind of keep it there just because it's a relic. It's not even produced anymore. Its name is Tardiva, but I still kind of like it. Oh, and there was a castor bean in the front. They look terrible until September, and then they're 8 feet tall and look majestic. So COVID given me the opportunity for the last couple seasons to do a lot of construction in the gardens because, of course, there was no buses on the roads. There wasn't as many visitors. And so that just gave me the idea to start coming up with new things to build and construct or put in the gardens. And this is actually an old greenhouse. It'll be covered with shade cloth, and it'll all have our fiber optic lighting in it for when we light up the gardens this summer and the winter, or sorry, later this summer. This is just a gate. A friend of mine helped me build it years. It took us about a week to come up with this, and it's kind of unique and different. I just want to get on to something that's exciting for us. Many of you know, if you've been out to the gardens, you've been to the Fountain Amphitheater, you would have probably seen the fountains. More recently, we've been doing more concerts and theatrical productions out there, and that will continue on. That arrow you're looking at is where you will see. You'll be seated and look up at the fountains on the hill. There's another bamboo stake right here. That's the front stage. This just gives you an idea how it goes from nothing to an actual amphitheater fairly quickly. And there's the wedding garden I pointed out earlier. You've seen the bird aviary, the Magnolia Avenue I just showed you with the new greenhouse. This was just in the fall. That whole stage was dug out 2 years ago. There's the new sculptures going up in the background that all have shade cloth on them, 16 feet up in the air. And this is us constructing, us is usually me, myself, and I, by the way. And that's making the stage wall there and the stage. And that's where I showed you just a moment ago. It's all dug out, that circled area. And that's because what we're doing is I knew this brand new technology was coming out. Here's the entrance into the amphitheater now. We gussied it all up for future productions and plays and things like that. Give you a little extra privacy. As I say, we dug it out. We ran this fountain for the last wedding of the season, and then, oh, thank goodness we were done with the show for this year, because after the last fountain show, the whole thing basically collapsed, and that was okay because we knew we were getting ready to install the new stuff, and there's all the new steel in there. So we have these brand new pumps that came in from Germany, and they're computerized, and they're fountain pumps, and they're specifically designed to put on a good show. And that's them right there. My little dog is right beside it for reference. The pump can put water about 48 feet in the air, which is an awful long way up. And I don't need pipes anymore. You saw pipes in the previous photos. I just basically stick a communication cable to the back of the pump that's connected ultimately to my computer. These pumps can run on my cell phone. They have lights built into them now, and that's a few of them being tested out last fall. We were the first, company, if you will, in Canada to get these pumps and try them. And as we speak, we have more being shipped over from Germany. and we will have a very, very nice big show to show you later on. And we'll show at the Bellagio. We'll give them a good run, because we have the same tricks that the Bellagio has too. So this kind of gets me to the end of our presentation, what's going to happen. So as I alluded to, later on in August this year, we are going to open up the gardens. That's our 10th anniversary celebration. And we'll light up about 4 acres of the gardens, and part of it will be the fountains going at night. It'll be all themed. It's a 31-minute performance. Each piece of music will have its own special theme with it. And there's smoke machines, and there's lasers and lights and fiber optic lighting. We have 18 kilometers of fiber optic lighting. And I think it'll be quite spectacular. At least it looks good on my computer here when we trial it all out. In the next month, we're going to start putting it all outside, so it'll be filmed. You'll likely see it if you listen to CTV Kitchener for some of your news or other programming. Commercials will be on that station, and probably CH Hamilton. So we're really, really excited about it. These are our test lights that came in from China. We spent 6-7 weeks working with an engineer from China to have our lights speak exactly the same language, the way we want it to, as they speak with the pumps, and they speak with the music and everything else that gets done with them. And I think our brand new lights will be here almost any day now, actually, and we'll start to install them all. As I get older, one last thing, I do not like to work every single day in the gardens anymore. Sometimes I look outside and go, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to sit inside and I'm just going to write some music. This is our music programs. I still write the music for all the fountains that we do during the day, and now I wrote it for the evening. And I took, during COVID also, evening courses, lighting courses from some punk and in Tennessee. And I say he's a punk because he looks like he's 16 years old. He's 29. He has 3 children. He's married and lives in a nice house. And I think, how can you look so young when you're when you're 29 years old? But anyway, I took these courses with him just to learn how to design and program lights and things like that. And I think we got something sort of fun. So much, Linda, for having me today, and everybody else for tuning in. And I think we're very, very ready. If there's any questions about this presentation, or you have any questions about your own gardens or anything that might be of interest in you in your own garden, I'd be very happy to hang out here if necessary to help you out. All right, so thank you very much again. I'm going to give this back to Catherine, and we'll go from there.